Patch review. So I'm just gonna jump straight into it because we got a lot to go down. This patch is pretty big and I like it. So this is the patch 11.4 note rundown. Here's the quick key highlights if you want to pause and look at these, but we're gonna go over these really quickly because I definitely want to talk about some of the bigger changes in here, which I know are gonna take up some time. So to start off the patch, we have a Muumuu, and his base health is going up and his E base damage is being increased at later ranks. This is a revert they gave him at the very start of the preseason and season start, where he was being really broken with the new items, and they went hard on him and nerfed him to the ground, which was very not needed at all, since it was mainly the items and the combination of items that are making him OP. So definitely gonna see more Muumuu buffs because this isn't enough, and the dude's been really struggling. So definitely expect to see more Muumuu buffs in the coming weeks. Braum's R cooldown has been decreased as well, about 20 seconds on each rank, going down to a maximum of 80 instead of 100. That's pretty nice, since CDR is not in the game anymore and is now haste into CDR, and haste isn't as good. But Braum's ulti is still kind of lackluster, since it only fully knocks up the first person hits and then everyone else very minorly, and Braum isn't always in the best spot right now in terms of support strength as well. So it would be nice if we see more buffs to him at a later date. So Caitlyn has a very small buff here, but it's a very big buff. So her AD per growth per level was 3.3, now 3.8, so 0.5 AD per level, nothing too crazy. But her attack speed growth went from 3.5% per level to 4%. So 0.5 attack speed per level is pretty significant, especially on an ADC who might also take Legend Alacrity or might not. Percentage attack speeds are scary things, and last time Caitlyn got a small buff like this, she became top tier. And I'm not gonna say she's gonna become top tier from this buff because it is very small, but definitely gonna become playable and might rupture the ADC meta a little bit, just a tad bit. Camille's tactical sweep, which is a W, has went down at 2 seconds at each rank, including max rank, which is really nice since it does give you a better trading opportunity and less overall sustain for her, since the 2 seconds will add up. Nothing crazy, definitely still gonna be an insane top lane pick though. Bjorn's passive was buffed pretty massively, so it used to be a 2.5 base, now a 3% base, and it used to be a 4.5% base per 100 AD, now it's a 5.5% per 100 AD. So this is gonna give her way better trading, way better dueling, way better team fight, just way better damage across the board. And not only does it increase the damage, but when you proc these vitals, it also gives you healing based off your damage with the build items that she usually goes with Divine Sunder and Hydra sometimes. She'll definitely get a lot more healing on top of the percentage damage. So pretty big buff. Probably start seeing it a little bit more. Definitely not top tier, but very nice buff for fewer players out there. Jinx buff once again. So they did pull back on the buffs last patch by nerfing their health when they gave her all those buffs. Turns out they're actually putting their health back, so it's back to 610. Eventually Jinx will be pretty good if they're gonna keep buffing her like this. They want her to be good, so eventually it'll be a good pickup. Even now it's a decent pickup, and high elo it's not the best since just very immobile ADC and tons of divers right now in the meta. Kai'Sa got a small nerf. Base damage per missile has been down at max rank, went from 110 to 100 now, so there's 10 per missile, and this applies to the evolved missile as well. So I don't know the numbers roughly in my head. I'm sure you could do them, but roughly you're losing about 40 damage if every missile was to hit the same target. Probably a bit more depending if you're evolved or not. This does seem like a pretty big change, but at the end of the day, Kai'Sa is a really good AC because of the tools she has on top of the damage she has as well. They are buffing Katarina for absolutely no reason that no one asked by changing her ulti on hit damage ratio to be from 20% to 25, 30, and 35%, and giving them more AD scaling. So the AD scaling is pretty useless, and some people might look at this build and think, or this buff, and say that it just doesn't apply to her current build since they're more AP centric now since the Kraken Slayer nerf. But if the Katarina decides to tech in a on-hit item such as Bork or Nashor's, which the Nashor's tech is pretty popular, now the on-hit ratio is going to be a bit higher, applying more damage, and Katarina's already in a very good spot, so I'm surprised they went with another buff just to accommodate for silly off-meta picks. We saw the same buff go to Ergot as well, went from 50% on-hit damage ratio on his purge to 75%. Pretty nice, but nothing substantial here. Ergot is in a bad spot because he has bad matchups, but it definitely could make him work, and this is probably going to help a decent amount. It's just really hard to tech an on-hit item on Ergot as well. Wits End is definitely one that works though. Lee Sin buff, they lowered his Q by 1 second on all ranks. Good that it's a small buff. You did not want to buff this man too much. He will take over jungle metas all by himself. They actually nerfed Renekton's healing on his Q here, both on the non-champions and the enraged non-champion healing. This was directly at pro play because Renekton was seeing some pro play and he was just deciding too many matchups by just healing off minion waves. I don't think many Renektons will feel this in solo queue too much. Maybe they will, but sad to see an underplay champion get nerfed. Always is. This is definitely the meat of the patch that I want to talk about. This and items. Samira nerfs are here and they are massive. So I didn't think they were going to go through all of these when I did the patch or the PvE patch preview, but it looks like every single one of them made it. So right off the bat, her passive Daredevil Impulse, the bonus damage ratio was a 7.5% AD flat. That's a 3.5% to 10.5%. So a bit higher at later ranks, but being down about 4% is massive in terms of damage. This is, if you don't know, when she uses her sword. So her sword autos and her sword Q. And her Q as well went down in damage ratio from 100% AD ratio flat to 80 to 110%. So once again, a little bit more damage at later rank. But it's the fact that she's losing so much aggression early when she's such a good early game pick as well. And her blade wheel, which is W, is now from 1 second to 0.75 seconds, so just 0.25 less. It's gonna suck, so she can't block as much, and it gives a little bit more room for counterplay. But this is probably the biggest nerf to her. E is no longer usable on her allies. She cannot dash to her own allies no longer. She can only dash to enemies and now enemy turrets as well. And her dash speed went from 2050 to 1600, almost cutting the speed in half. And on top of this, her ult now actually has a cooldown of 8 seconds to 3 seconds. So no longer can she dash in, ulti, kill 2 people, dash again and reset, and ulti again. She most likely will actually have to wait at least 4 seconds before ulti does again. Quite a bit of counterplay. I understand why to do it. It's really frustrating champion to play against, and it sometimes doesn't feel like there's much counterplay, especially if your team plays with her, but wow. Lots of safety and lots of damage is down for sure. I'm not sure if the 10% AD scaling on a Q at later ranks and the slight about 3% as well in the passive at later ranks will help enough. She's honestly been performing a little bit worse. She requires a lot of team setup, which just isn't there in solo queue as well. This is a crazy change. I'm sure they're trying to have it counterplay in a kit and then rebuff her, but this champion is definitely going to be pretty bad in the next patch. Probably still playable just because she has a lot in her kit, but nowhere near as good as she is now. They nerfed Skarner. For what reason? They took down his base health and his base health regen. Honestly, this is a change that gets me a little upsetting when there's Karthus and Udyr running around the jungle, but I guess lowering his health is also decent, but it's probably not going to stop him from what he does. Skarner does what he does, so he builds a lot of health, so he'll probably just keep running in, making great game-changing picks with his ult, being a good ult bot. I don't think this will affect him too much, but it's an interesting one to say the least. Soraka got a pretty hefty buff here. She really needs it. She's struggling when most enchanters are thriving in the Moonstone meta, where her Q movement speed bonus is given by about 5% here max. Yeah, from 25 to 30. 5% of all ranks, even 15 to 20 at rank 1. That's actually really big because more movement speed just means better positioning and how she really needs it. And they buffed their W heal just a tad bit. That's to accommodate for the Moonstone nerf for late against the latest patch notes. These won't make it insane, but they'll definitely feel nice, especially 5% move speed. Percentages are always strong, especially when she has a passive who also enables her to get more percentage move speed as well. But nothing too crazy here. Talon, on the other hand, this one's a scary one. So they made the W rake cooldown scale now. So it used to be 9 seconds all ranks. Now it goes down to 7 seconds. And this is the ability max too. And the bonus damage ratio went up just a tad bit by 15% AD. Making it 2 more damage and making it come up 2 seconds faster is pretty big. Not only is his wave clear gonna be better, but his fighting is gonna be better in his team fighting. He'll be able to consistently throw out 2 rakes in a fight if it goes long enough now. Sometimes it wouldn't really happen, but in a team fight you could definitely expect him to throw out 2 to even 3 rakes sometimes now. So this is definitely a scary change, and I think the biggest factor is the fact that he's gonna be able to wave clear better with more damage on it and lower cooldown. Definitely would be watching out for Talon. I definitely think he still struggles with some of the top tiers, but he'll definitely probably shoot up with 2% win rate. Probably say stop saying definitely for this video. His base damage went up by a tad bit as well here, now making him have the highest base AD in the game, which was previously to Maokai for 70, and now Tryndamere at 72. Just 3 AD, but it's a nice buff nonetheless, especially for someone like Tryndamere who will get a lot of random crits, especially in the really early game. You can see this is a 6 AD buff per hit, 3 AD. Depends how you look at it and how often you are at getting crits and how lucky. Pretty big one, decent nonetheless. I'm sure Tryndamere mains out there are pretty happy. Varus needs a lot of love. This ADC is struggling hard. So they buffed his W to now increase the total amount of missing health percentage when you charge up your WQ. It's a nice change, it's a welcome one, but I think it's not going to be enough for how low Varus is down there in the meta. Vigor, on the other hand, saw some very nice buffs. Vigor is definitely going to be a top tier pick for sure. Low elo, probably even a higher pick priority and higher elos as well, because having a lower cost on your Q and a lower cooldown on your ult is very, very strong. Very strong. Especially when he does struggle a little bit on mana sustain until he gets his last chapter. And with the item buffs that we're about to see after this, you'll probably understand why he's really strong. We'll talk about it a little bit more there. So into the item buffs, where they're buffing Rageblade by 5% attack speed. I think it's pretty negligible. I don't even think it's going to matter. Most people don't even buy Rageblade unless they're abusing, but even for the people that do buy it, 5% is 5%. It's not going to be a game-changing stat. It's not going to make you win 1% more of games, I don't think. Moonstone Renewer is also getting nerfed in the early ranks, where instead of 70 to 100, it's 50 to 100. This is in turn because Moonstone is really insane, and they don't want people who aren't designed to use Moonstone to use them. So they want to say goodbye to Moonstone Jarvan, Moonstone Zillion. They want only like enchanters to be using Moonstone. And this is why you saw Soraka heal it buff, because it's to compensate for this when Soraka is really struggling in the Moonstone meta. They also buffed the Grievous Wounds items by a bit on their stats. So Morello went from 70 to 80 AP, Morello went from 20 AD to 25 AD, and the health from Chainsaw went from 150 to 250. So just a little bit of stat booster, because as is right now, these items do not feel good to complete. You almost never complete them. You hold on to the components because they're much stronger and very cheap. Mage items. So here's what I was talking about. This is pretty big as well. So we'll go over Everfrost first. They changed Everfrost's build path. It's still the Lost Chapter and the Blasting Wand, but it was really awkward to sit on those two items and then try to get 1250 gold on the back to finish it. So now it has a Kendall gem in it too, so you have a more of a haste and a health opportunity to buy. And so this way you don't have to sit on the items and then get 1250 gold. You can sit on the items and now only get 450 gold. So on top of this, they also buffed the health. They buffed the damage of the active and the cast time delay to cast it as well. So this is a huge buff. Everfrost was already a slept on item. It was actually very strong, but the problem was the build path is incredibly awkward, and it's a little, I don't want to say hard, but awkward to get used to the delay. And some high elo players and weird champions like Cassid and Shaco support were really using it. So now that we're going to see this become widely accessible to more champions, you'll definitely see a lot more be using this. And this is a really good counter item to Yasuo as it goes through his wind wall. And it has the lowest active in the game with 20 seconds, so high utility as well. So you could definitely see Vigor start building this and a lot more other popular mages as a defensive option. And then with that, they also reworked Cosmic Drive. So Cosmic Drive no longer grants bonus move speed when dealing ability damage. Instead is now, if you have at least 160 AP, you could gain 20 ability haste and 10 to 30 move speed based on level. And then they reduced the haste on its base, because now if you get the 160 AP, you get 40 haste because it's 20 base, 20 there. Before you only got 30. So the fact that it gives 40 haste is insane. That is the most haste you get on one item, and it's not hard to hit 160 AP. Since Cosmic Drive itself has 75 AP, and any mythic has 80 AP, in terms of Leandri's, Luden's, Everfrost, and I think Night Harvester as well, you could just buy a mythic, Cosmic Drive, and you could hit that threshold. And most people have Adaptive Force on a Ruin, so you will definitely hit the threshold if you go a slightly weaker mythic that only has 70 AP. This is quite a change, since Everfrost itself gives 20 haste, Cosmic gives 40, you get 60 haste right off the bat, not even counting Ionian Boots if you do that too. So people who like haste builds like Lux, Vigor are going to become very, very strong. Plus the extra move speed this early as well is really nice with the defensive active of Everfrost. Be definitely on the lookout for the rise of mages with Everfrost Cosmic. It is a very strong combo that should not be slept on. In this patch, jungle as a whole is also going to get nerfed because they are tuning down the camps. So as is right now, junglers have a bit too much control in the game, and this is duly large in part due to how fast they clear camps, how much XP they get from the camps, and how much gold they get from the camps. They're usually way more ahead of anyone else in terms of gold and can buy the most items to spike faster too. And it doesn't help that some junglers are really fast at clearing versus some of the shittier, slower clear junglers, since Tiamat isn't a thing anymore. So they lowered the XP across all the camps and the gold, and they even increased the health of Gromp a little bit, just to make it harder to take as well. This isn't really a nerf to anyone particular, it's more of just a nerf to everyone in jungle, which sucks because there's a lot of junglers that are being held back by them not having very good jungle clear sustain, while others thrive because of how fast they are. So in reality, this did not do much except for just make jungle as a whole a bit weaker here. And that about does it for the patch, because aside from this is small changes that I won't really get into, but overall it's a very big patch, and I would say to look out for the Everfrost Cosmic Mage changes here. We'll definitely see Vigor, Lux, Kassadin, possibly the rise of support Shaco, a couple more as well I'm probably missing, but definitely huge. Samira is a really big takeaway, Vigor is a big takeaway as well, Talon's decent sized, and maybe even Caitlyn shaking up the meta a little bit more for ADCs, and the Fiora change as well. Pretty decent sized patch, pretty interesting changes, especially on the items of Samira. Let me know what you guys think, and I can't wait to see how this patch plays out. The outro, so here's my shitty outro. Thank you guys for coming. I really enjoy you guys watching my content and supporting me, even though I take random breaks sometimes. I may not be the most consistent, but I try to push out that content for you guys because I know some of you guys really do enjoy it, and I do appreciate that, so thank you so much. And if you're all the way here at the outro, comment Oreos down below. I want to see if you're here, and if you're already here, you probably are, but consider subscribing. Do all things right here. And you know, we do streams every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on Twitch, usually around 12 p.m. PST. And you can join our Discord where we're pretty active and talk about all cool things there, and some anime too as well. Thank you guys for always being here and supporting me. God bless. Enjoy the rest of your day.